The air in the locker room was damp with chlorine and steam, the faint buzz of the overhead vent mixing with the sound of running water. It was supposed to be quiet after the swim class, a moment of routine, but it became anything but. My towel had slipped from me, forgotten at my feet, and the glass of the shower stall fogged over as he stepped closer. Jason pressed me gently against the wall, his hand landing beside my shoulder, water dripping down his wrist. My breath caught somewhere between panic and disbelief. I could feel the heat of him, the tension in his body, and the conflict that vibrated between us like a taut wire about to snap. His fingers moved along my side, tracing the path water had taken as if he were memorizing something that wasn't meant to be known. I braced myself against the cold tile, trying to ignore the fact that my flip-flops had slid away somewhere and that everything felt far too intimate, far too irreversible. He paused for just a second, and in that space, guilt slammed into me like a wave. But before I could speak or move, he leaned in again, his breath uneven, and everything inside me gave way. My knees nearly buckled under the weight of it, yet I didn't step away. I didn't stop him. He said my name like it was fragile, like it might break if spoken too loud. When his mouth brushed mine, it wasn't full of fire or urgency, but something far more dangerous, tenderness. His touch was cautious, as if part of him knew how wrong this was but couldn't walk away. The sound of the water, the rhythm we tried to suppress, and the fear that someone might hear kept us teetering on the edge of panic. When he asked if it hurt, something in his voice cracked, and the shame that had been simmering suddenly turned icy cold. I never pictured myself in this place, not now, not like this. I was almost 40, I had kids, 2 boys, one of whom was sitting just outside those walls waiting for me to drive him home. And Jason, he wasn't just anyone. He was my son's closest friend, barely in his 20s, familiar in all the wrong ways. For years, he had been in our lives, helping out at family gatherings, teasing me about my cooking, calling me, Mrs. Holloway, with a boyish smile. I had always kept a safe distance, until lately, when that distance began to blur without me realizing it. A few harmless drives, late-night practices, and suddenly we were here, past the point of return. What do you do when the one person you should protect becomes the one you secretly want? That question swirled in my mind as his hand found my waist, steadier than I expected. I hated the comparisons that began forming, the way he held me, the way he looked at me, as if he saw more than he should. This morning, I'd packed school lunches and listened to my husband talk about discipline and homework. Our life had felt steady, reliable. But now, under the weight of Jason's closeness and the sting of boiling guilt, that life felt like something fragile I'd cracked with my own hands. He leaned his forehead against the back of my neck, the warmth of his skin conflicting with the chill in my bones. He whispered a quiet apology, so soft it almost hurt to hear. I could have stopped everything right then. I should have. But instead, I turned toward him, brushed my lips against his wrist, and whatever restraint we had left dissolved in that breath. The sound he made was low, broken, full of something deeper than lust. As I grabbed the edge of the shower valve for balance, the cold bite of metal grounded me just enough to realize what I'd done. What we'd done. Every place where our bodies touched felt like it was burning, but inside me, a colder shame was settling in, quiet and thick like the water collecting at our feet and swirling toward the drain. Jason moved again, slowly and with care, but there was still a stretch that made my jaw tighten, a strange mixture of pain and longing I hadn't experienced in years, maybe ever. Tears welled up without warning, hot on my cheeks, though the shower washed them away before they could fall far. Each one felt like a secret I hadn't admitted, a truth I didn't want to face. He murmured that maybe we should stop. But before I could think, my hand had found his wrist, and my voice, unfamiliar, desperate, whispered, "Don't." The word hung between us like a dare. It echoed through the empty space, daring the world to catch us in the act. Nothing happened. No alarms. No footsteps. Just steam and silence. Then he moved again, slow and deep, and a sound escaped me, muffled against my hand. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make my heart pound with the weight of it all. Everything blurred. The lights above flickered, shadows stretched across the tiles, and for a second I thought I heard a door creak somewhere nearby. But no one came. I thought about my wedding ring, still sitting in the glove box of my car. I'd taken it off earlier to put on hand lotion and had forgotten to slip it back on. The irony hit hard. I had hidden a symbol of loyalty without even meaning to, and now here I was, stepping straight into betrayal, fully aware. His hand found my stomach, steady and wide, a gesture that felt almost protective, though nothing about this was safe. That gentle touch broke through me more than anything else. My legs gave out, my breath caught in pieces. My whole body clung to him in a way I couldn't control, and I felt the way he trembled, trying to hold it all together. The coolness of the tile was sharp against my cheek as everything inside me came undone. When he finally gave in, the sound he made was soft and shattered, and then his knees gave out too. He wrapped his arms around my waist as we both sank into that moment, shaking beneath the cooling spray that now stung more than it soothed. His forehead pressed gently to my lower back, his breath unsteady. Neither of us moved. We stayed still as if that could erase what had just happened, as if time might grant us mercy if we didn't speak or breathe too loudly. I swallowed down a sob that threatened to escape, the taste of chlorine and regret rising in my throat. The locker room felt cold now, the air touching my skin like a quiet judgment. We washed in silence, both of us careful not to speak, barely looking at each other. He stared at the drain. I stared at the ceiling, counting tiny cracks to hold back the tears. His hand slapped the tile behind my shoulder, water spraying off his wrist, and the narrow stall filled with the sharp scent of chlorine and soap. Jason's hips pressed me against the wall before I could breathe. My towel lay bunched at my feet, steam fogging the frosted glass, and the first push of his width made my stomach tighten with shock, a whimper echoing against porcelain. His breath caught, heavy and damp, while the locker room air vent words somewhere outside like a distant warning we both ignored. The showers were supposed to be empty after the late swim class, but the echo of splashing kids still clung to the floor drains. His fingers trembled when they traced water down my ribcage, as if mapping a coastline nobody should ever find. I braced my palms on slick tile, my heartbeat thrumming louder than the thud of my flip-flops sliding away, and I felt him hesitate, just long enough for guilt to flare, before he drew one jagged breath and eased deeper. Heat bloomed where cold water had stung seconds earlier. My knees shook so hard the curtain hooks rattled on their metal rod, yet I pressed back anyway. Leaving that space between us suddenly felt more dangerous than closing it. He whispered my name like he was afraid to hear it out loud. I tasted mint gum and pool chemicals on his breath when he bent to kiss the corner of my mouth in a way that felt almost tender, almost apologetic. The pressure of his chest pinned my shoulder blades, water skimming over our skin, and the world narrowed to the uneven rhythm we fought to keep quiet, knowing one stray grunt could carry down the tiled corridor. His pulse hammered against my spine just before his voice broke with a strained, "Tell me if this hurts," words that made the guilt rush colder than the water sliding off my hair. I never imagined I'd cross this line. Not at 39, with two teenage boys waiting in the bleachers for me to drive them home. And certainly not with Jason, my eldest son's closest friend. 21, still sun-freckled from weekend lifeguard shifts. He'd called me Mrs. Holloway for years, helped move patio furniture, laughed too loud at my chilly competitions. In every memory, until tonight, I'd answered him with a maternal distance I thought was permanent. 1 month of driving the boys to late swim practices must have eroded that boundary grain by grain, until a single after-hours joke in the parking lot tipped everything into a slide. I can't stop. What would you do if the one person you were supposed to protect was the one you ended up craving in secret? The question punched through the hiss of the shower as his hand slid to steady my hip, fingers splaying wider than my own husband's ever had. I hated that the comparison even surfaced, while Jason's ragged breathing told me he was terrified too. A memory flashed, preparing sack lunches this morning. Peanut butter smell filling the kitchen while my husband lectured our younger son about grades. And I wondered how a life could feel so solid at dawn yet liquefy by dusk under hot water and trembling hands. Jason leaned his forehead into the back of my neck, beads of water striking us both, and for 1 second, the sheer wrongness made my lungs seize, until he whispered, "Sorry," in a voice so raw it sounded like pleading. Instead of pushing him away, I turned my face enough to brush my lips against the inside of his wrist. And the closeness shattered, whatever flimsy dam we still pretended existed. He groaned low and guttural, hips jolting, and the old chrome shower valve squeaked when I clutched it for balance, nails biting cold metal. Every inch of me burned where his skin met mine, but shame cooled colder than the water swirling at our ankles, pooling around the drain in cloudy spirals. He moved again, careful, deeper, almost shaking, and the stretch made my jaw clench with a mix of sting and wanting I hadn't felt in years. Maybe ever. I felt tears hot on my cheeks, though the water washed them away before they could fall far, each drop a confession neither of us spoke. He whispered, "We should stop, yet." His fingers tightened like anchors at my waist, and I heard myself say, "Don't," with a desperation that stunned us both into silence for half a breath. The words echoed off empty stalls, daring the universe to punish us. When no alarm sounded, he thrust once more, slow and agonizingly full, until my moans slipped out, half smothered against my fist. Tiles blurred in steam, the fluorescent light above flickered. Somewhere a door hinge squealed, but no footsteps followed. I thought of my wedding ring locked in the glove box because I'd forgotten to slip it back on after lotioning my hands, and the irony twisted cruel. I'd hidden proof of loyalty while stepping straight into betrayal. His hand slid to my stomach, palms splayed in a gesture that felt absurdly protective in a scene built on damage, and the tenderness unraveled me faster than any roughness could. My legs buckled, breath fractured, and I clenched around him so hard his teeth clicked as he tried to stay quiet, the tile cool against my flushed cheek. When he gave in, a shaking exhale, a stuttering pulse, I felt his knees hit the floor behind me, arms wrapping my waist. Both of us trembling under cooling water that now stung instead of soothed. He pressed his forehead to my lower back, breath coming in shallow bursts, and for a moment, neither of us moved, as if stillness could rewind the last 10 minutes. My chest heaved with a sob I swallowed, tasting chlorine and regret on my tongue while locker room air crawled icy over goosebumped skin. We rinsed in silence, movements awkward and hurried, his eyes fixed on the drain while I stared at the mottled ceiling tiles, counting chips to keep from crying. He turned off the valve with a sharp twist. The water noise died so suddenly that the distant hum of vending machines sounded deafening. I stepped out first, grabbed a fresh towel, wrapped it tight like armor, and felt the truth settle like iron shackles. This couldn't be undone, and the story of who I was had just split into before and after. I looked at him through steam-clouded glass. He was leaning his forehead against the wall, shoulders heaving once, then straightening, as if he'd just remembered he was 21 and supposed to be invincible. My hand trembled when I opened the stall door. He caught my wrist lightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" I nodded. Words felt impossible. He let go, guilt flickering across his face so bright it almost masked the lingering heat in his eyes. We dressed in separate corners of the locker room. Every zipper sounded like a gunshot, and when I tied my hair back, my fingers fumbled enough to rip a strand free. He waited by the exit, hood up, eyes on the wet floor. For a heartbeat, I almost reached to smooth the wrinkle in his sleeve, like a mother would, before realizing how grotesque that instinct now felt. Instead, I walked past him, shoulders tight, pulse loud enough to drown out his whispered, "I'm sorry." Outside, drizzle cooled the night air. Parking lot lamps cast puddles that reflected our silhouettes, elongated and warped. My van sat under a broken light that flickered like a failing pulse. My phone buzzed on the seat, unread messages from my husband asking what time practice ended. Jason stopped a step behind me, breath misting white, and I knew, without turning, that we were both staring at the same van windows, where our reflections swam in oily rainbows. My hand hovered over the handle, but didn't pull. This was the moment I couldn't take back. The split second after crossing the line when turning around was still possible, yet I felt my body rooting into the wrong choice, because it finally made me feel something other than numb. The locker room light shut off inside with a clack, plunging the building into darkness that felt conspiratorial. I heard Jason exhale shakily behind me, the sound hitting my spine like a stone. I opened the van door, climbed in, and closed it gently, without goodbye. But the truth of what we'd done slid into the seat beside me, buckling itself in for the long ride home. If you've ever lived with a secret that made you ache and burn at the same time, this story might speak to you more than you'd like. Please like and subscribe. The more you watch, the more stories like this will find others holding back the same truth. Let's begin. The next morning, the house smelled of burnt toast and leftover chlorine, a mix that clung to my clothes when I packed lunches before dawn. Mark scrolled headlines at the table, asking if the boys had clean jerseys, never once looking up long enough to see the tremor in my hands. I answered on autopilot, sliding sandwiches into zip-top bags like assembly line parts, for a life that ran smoother without feelings. In the hallway, our golden retriever thumped her tail, waiting for someone to tie her leash, but I was already late for work. The boys shouldered their backpacks, earbuds already in, moving around me like I was just a piece of furniture that occasionally blocked their path. Silent, indifferent, their routines intact, their gazes never quite meeting mine. I kissed each forehead, like I always did, but this time, the gesture tasted different. Like guilt, like chlorine clinging to skin. No amount of mint gum could mask it. Outside, the world was gray and wet. Traffic crawled, the wipers on my windshield squealing every few seconds as they dragged across fog left behind by last night's rain. My fingers drummed against the steering wheel every time my mind wandered back to the shower tiles, to the water, to his breath against my neck. A minivan cut me off near the school drop-off, the driver waving a lazy apology. I barely registered it. Instead, I saw Jason's face again, eyes wide, lips parted, whispering my name like it was something breakable. Work didn't offer much escape. Beige cubicles, soft phone chimes, that hum of artificial calm meant to make everyone feel like nothing personal ever happens here. But that's the thing about personal crisis, it sticks out. Like a red scarf in a snowstorm. You can try to bury it in routine, but it still flaps in the wind. I typed numbers into spreadsheets until the columns blurred and doubled, pretending those neat little rows were walls, something solid, something that could hold back everything I was trying not to feel. Each time the copier jammed, the clunk and grind made me flinch. It sounded too much like the shower curtain hooks rattling on a metal rod. That sound wouldn't leave me alone. Not even here. At lunch, I didn't go to the break room. I sat alone in my car, seat reclined just enough, windows cracked for fresh air. The breeze brought with it the warm, sharp scent of sun on asphalt and a distant hint of fried food from somewhere down the block. But none of it settled the nerves coiled in my chest. I opened the family group chat and scrolled through messages, Mark asking about milk, new wiper blades for the car, and if I could remind our youngest about his dentist appointment. I replied, short and steady, like always. Then my thumb hovered over another name. Jason, just his initials in a gray circle, glowing softly on the screen like a dare. I remembered the first time he rode home with us after practice, legs too long for the back seat, knees bumping into the minivan floorboard. Laughing with my sons about how awful the coach's whistle was, the kind of carefree laughter that used to fill my home without making my stomach twist. But now, even his name lit up like a fuse I wasn't sure I had the strength to extinguish. I remember the first time I offered him something, stale granola bars from the center console. He grinned as he took one, unwrapping it like it was a candy bar instead of a crumbling leftover from a forgotten grocery run. Anything tastes good after 2 hours in chlorine, he joked, and I laughed, too hard, too long. That grin should have been harmless. Just a boy being polite. But it wasn't, not the way it warmed the small, hollowed places inside me. 3 weeks later, he was sitting at our dinner table, invited by Mark along with the rest of the relay squad before regionals. He passed me the mashed potatoes, his knuckles brushing mine, just a light, accidental touch, but it sent a bolt of heat straight up my arm. I nearly dropped the bowl. I spent the rest of that meal chewing like my mouth was full of coins. Every time he laughed, God, that laugh, I felt something inside me clench like a fist. Evenings followed their usual rotation. Cook, check homework, fold laundry, crash on the couch. The late-night talk shows would drone in the background, volume dipping lower when Mark finally dozed off, remote slipping from his fingers. Somewhere along the way, the silence between us stopped being temporary. It became something permanent, something that sat between us like another presence. But I didn't really notice until Jason did. One night, after swim practice, I stayed in the car long after my boys had already gone inside. Jason lingered on the sidewalk, looking back before jogging over. "Why do you always wait out here?" he asked. We were parked under a single street lamp across from the pool. Steam drifted off the surface, like ghost breath rising from the water. It was quiet out there. Too quiet. I shrugged. Sometimes the noise inside feels louder than the quiet out here. He nodded, eyes too wise for 21. "It's okay," he said, voice low. "To breathe wherever breathing feels easiest." That was the night the guilt started to bloom, like weeds between sidewalk cracks. Hidden at first, easy to step over. But once you see them, you can't unsee them. I lay awake that night. I could hear the boys' ceiling fans spinning and Mark's soft, predictable snores. I made myself a promise. Drew a line in my head. And I swore I'd never cross it. That promise lasted one practice. Jason began staying after to help my youngest with flip-turn drills. It gave me time to sit up in the bleachers and grade papers, clipboard balanced on my knees, red pen tapping against plastic. When practice ended, he'd offer to carry my satchel to the car. Always polite, always smiling, even when I insisted I could manage. One evening, I tripped on the steps leaving the bleachers. His hand caught my shoulder. Just a simple, reflexive gesture. But my heart jerked in my chest so violently, I had to pause. The world tilted, and that line, the one I promised to keep clear, blurred like ink in water. I spent the rest of that meal chewing like my mouth was full of coins. Every time he laughed, God, that laugh, I felt something inside me clench like a fist. Evenings followed their usual rotation: cook, check homework, fold laundry, crash on the couch. The late-night talk shows would drone in the background, volume dipping lower when Mark finally dozed off, remote slipping from his fingers. Somewhere along the way, the silence between us stopped being temporary. It became something permanent, something that sat between us like another presence. But I didn't really notice until Jason did. One night, after swim practice, I stayed in the car long after my boys had already gone inside. Jason lingered on the sidewalk, looking back before jogging over. "Why do you always wait out here?" he asked. We were parked under a single street lamp across from the pool. Steam drifted off the surface, like ghost breath rising from the water. It was quiet out there. Too quiet, I shrugged. Sometimes the noise inside feels louder than the quiet out here. He nodded, eyes too wise for 21. "It's okay," he said, voice low. "To breathe wherever breathing feels easiest." That was the night the guilt started to bloom, like weeds between sidewalk cracks. Hidden at first, easy to step over. But once you see them, you can't unsee them. I lay awake that night. I could hear the boys' ceiling fans spinning and Mark's soft, predictable snores. I made myself a promise. Drew a line in my head. And I swore I'd never cross it. That promise lasted one practice. I didn't trust myself, but I said yes anyway. Because excuses dressed in kindness were the only language Jason and I had been fluent in for weeks. The storm flashed as his headlights swept across the driveway, wind tossing wet leaves against the siding like impatient coins tossed by some unseen collector. I opened the door, just to keep the goggles from getting soaked, I told myself. Just a quick handoff, nothing more. I swore I'd keep him in the foyer, under the pendant light that always flickered like it could see right through me, bright enough to shame me back into reason. He stepped inside, rain dripping from his hair, shoulders slumped. He looked tired, eyes rimmed red from the loss, hair flat with water. When he handed me the goggles, our fingers brushed, barely, and my throat closed around the thank you I meant to say. Then lightning cracked so close it rattled a frame off the hallway wall. Something in me cracked with it. I heard myself ask if he could check the upstairs window, the one where the latch always sticks. Mark usually climbs the stepstool. Tonight, Mark was in Chicago. Jason nodded, voice hoarse. We crept past the boys' rooms, thunder covering our footsteps, carpet soft beneath our feet. He fiddled with the window latch, rain tugging the glass, his wrist slick and shining with water. "It's fixed," he said finally, turning toward me, framed in the flash and pulse of the storm. I should have walked him out. Should have said thanks and let the door swing shut behind him. But then another frame clattered downstairs, and we both jumped, then flinched forward instead of apart. The guest room door was cracked open. Still unlatched from when my mother visited last month. It offered a pocket of darkness just out of reach of sleeping boys and lightning's judgment. I stepped inside first. The smell of clean sheets and lavender spray hit me like an accusation. Jason followed. He didn't close the door completely, just enough to leave a sliver, a thin strip of nightlight glow that lit the tremble in his hands as they hovered near my shoulders. But they didn't land. "I didn't come here for this," he whispered. Rain dripped from his hair, pooling silently onto the carpet. My pulse pounded like it wanted out, beating so hard against my ribs, I thought it might break them. "Me neither," I whispered back, voice frayed. But my fingers were already curling into the damp fabric of his shirt. "Because it's easier to lie when you're touching the thing you're lying about." He kissed me like someone pulling a fire alarm. Fast, panicked, desperate. His lips were cold from the rain, but his breath was hot from everything he'd been holding back. I tasted salt, storm water and something else. Fear. His chest trembled when my hands slid under the hem of his shirt. The cotton clung to his skin, still cool from the drive, and my fingertips left trails of heat as they moved. The mattress nudged the backs of my calves. We stumbled, then collapsed into it. Springs groaned louder than the thunder. Lightning streaked through the curtains, etching his face in silver. That's when I saw it. The bruise. A deep plum shadow still blossoming on his cheek. Mark's punch. Still there. Still raw. Lit by stormlight, and everything we weren't supposed to be. My thumb brushed the bruise on his cheek. An apology without words, and he caught my hand, pressing a kiss into the center of my palm like he was trying to tuck every bad thing away inside that small circle of skin. Hide it. Heal it. Erase it. Forever. His shoulders were broader than any space Mark ever left in the bed. And when he eased me back into the pillows, the mistake unfolded with terrifying gentleness. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't messy. It was slow, intentional, and that somehow made it worse. He hovered over me, forehead resting against mine, his damp hair cooling the points where it touched my skin. "We stop now," he whispered, voice shaking at the edges. "Or it ruins you." I didn't answer with words, only a single, trembling shake of my head. Because the truth was, ruin had already taken up residence inside my chest. It lived there, quietly, patiently. And at least this ruin was warm. The sheets tangled around our legs, the scent of lavender crushed under the heat of what we poured into them. Every slow movement made the mattress groan. We froze each time thunder paused long enough for the house to listen. For the silence to strain toward footsteps that never came. My fingers slid down the groove of his spine, feeling each vertebrae like stepping stones across something dangerous. He shivered, and guilt, hotter than the desire itself, rose up again. But it didn't stop me. It never really tried. He whispered my name like it was both a confession and a curse. Every syllable thudded against my chest like a heartbeat I didn't know how to silence. I answered with a bite to my lower lip, stifling a sound that might have slipped through drywall too thin to carry secrets. The rain intensified outside, drumming the rhythm we couldn't escape, covering breath and skin and the sounds we weren't supposed to make. Whispers, pleas, promises we didn't mean, but needed to say. When it finally came, release, it felt like the moment a wave crests and breaks. Violent, inevitable, and then silence. The kind where you check your limbs, your breath, your soul, just to see if anything's still whole. We lay tangled in the after. Sweat cooling, the storm easing to a quiet drizzle that tapped against the window like someone knocking to be let in. Jason's hand moved through my hair with the gentleness of someone holding glass already cracked. His fingers trembled. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so soft I wasn't sure if it was him. Or the rain saying it for him. I turned my face into Jason's shoulder and breathed him in, knowing the scent would cling. Long after morning light peeled back the truth in the creases of that guest room quilt. Morning slipped in thin and gray, like regret. It filtered through the curtains before I even untangled my legs from the twisted sheets. Jason was already standing, buttoning his damp shirt in silence. The bruise on his cheek looked darker now, more defined against the soft light of dawn. We didn't kiss goodbye. No drawn-out promises. No lingering touches. Just one moment, his forehead pressed to mine, breath warm with things he didn't say. "Go back to sleep," he whispered. Then he was gone. I lay there, listening. Floorboards creaked, then a door opened. Closed. His car growled low and steady like it knew to drive away quietly. When the sound finally faded, a wave of relief and loss struck me at once, sharp, breath-stealing. I gasped into the lavender pillowcase like it might muffle the ache blooming inside my ribs. The storm had passed. The world outside held a silence so pure I could hear the neighbor's dog's tags clink 3 rooms away, like delicate wind chimes caught in memory. The boys woke crabby, travel-weary and oblivious to the scent of rain and sweat still clinging to my skin like betrayal. I brewed coffee, hands trembling, while my youngest whined about his missing goggles. Without a word, I slid them across the counter. He grinned. Crisis averted. Crisis I caused. His "thanks, Mom" felt like forgiveness I didn't deserve. My vision blurred around the edges. Laundry had piled up from the tournament weekend. So I fled to the garage under the guise of folding towels, hiding beside the hum of the washer. I pressed a damp towel to my face, let the cotton soak up the tears, and hoped the machines could drown out the sound of breaking. The washer turned like a slow drumbeat. A mechanical heart thudding Jason's name into the walls. Over and over. Mid-morning, Mark's texts buzzed through. Photos of conference donuts, jokes about keynote speakers, emojis, exclamation marks, the shape of normal. I replied in kind, enthusiastic, sunny. Each message a bright lie blinking like a hazard light. Then I tossed the phone onto the shelf between half-used paint cans and cried harder. Because lying had never felt so easy. Or so cruel. Outside, a drip echoed from the gutters, each splash on the concrete like applause for my performance. Jason didn't text. All day. No check-in. No update. No sorry. Just silence, colder than any accusation, sharper than any truth. I checked my phone every hour, pretending I wasn't looking for him. Each time the screen stayed blank, disappointment settled deeper, like sediment in still water. By dinner, the ache behind my ribs pulsed with every alert that wasn't his. Weather warnings, store coupons, spam, nothing that mattered. I set the table for 3. Mark's empty seat cast a shadow that stretched across the tile like a reminder I couldn't scrub out. The boys devoured pasta. I pushed mine around the plate, tasting only chlorine and memory. "Why do you keep looking at the hallway?" my older son asked, mouth full. "I thought I left the porch light on," I lied. The words tore the second they left my lips. After dishes, I folded towels again under the buzz of a bare laundry bulb that flickered like a stuttering confession. One towel, pulled from the guest linens, still carried his scent. Citrus and cedar. It hit my lungs and cut through the fabric softener like proof that couldn't be washed away. I pressed the towel to my face, knees buckling beneath the weight of everything unspoken. The concrete floor was cold against my thighs as I slid down the wall, shoulders trembling. The house groaned as the wind shifted, and for a breathless second, I imagined his footsteps on the porch again. My heart kicked hard, ready, reckless. But it was just the siding shifting under pressure. Logic settled like a stone in my gut. Heavy, still. I buried my face deeper into the towel, whispered his name once. Then spat it like a curse, hating the ache braided into every syllable. Upstairs, the boys laughed. Bright, buoyant laughter. Their joy lapped gently at the shore of a world I no longer deserved to stand on. Close to midnight, my phone buzzed. "Jason, made it home. Can't stop thinking." My fingers hovered, afraid to answer. Afraid not to. My pulse beat in my thumbs. "We can't keep this," I finally typed. His reply came fast. "I know, but I can't pretend it never happened." The blinking cursor stared back at me, silent and accusing. I sat there in the garage, breath shallow, wishing there were an off switch. For memory, for want, for guilt. But some things don't click off. They smolder. They spread. 2 days later, Mark returned. His suitcase thudded against the hall bench he'd built the first year we bought the house. He kissed my cheek, then paused, sniffed the air like something was wrong. But the dog barked and wagged his tail, and that small chaos distracted him. He shrugged it off. I hugged him too long. Too tight. Tears prickled at the corners of my eyes. I was convinced guilt had a scent stronger than lavender and chlorine. Maybe he didn't notice it. Maybe he did, and chose not to ask. That evening, Jason stopped by with the new swim practice schedules. He stood on the porch. Mark was in the living room, absorbed in the game, his shadow moving against the hallway wall. Jason's eyes flicked to it. I shook my head, almost imperceptibly. "Don't, please don't." I handed him the papers like they were something sacred. A thin lifeline made of folded ink and avoidance. We tried to stay away from each other after that. Rides split between parents. Conversations distilled to brief, clipped logistics. No warmth, no weight. But temptation didn't dissolve. It clung to every shared space. At the pool, I could feel him watching. The air steamed thick, but his gaze burned through it. Especially when I cheered too loud, too proud, trying to be someone else again. In the car, my hands clenched the wheel so tight that half-moon imprints stayed in my palms. Little reminders of how his breath had once stuttered against my neck. Of how I'd leaned into the ruin, wanting more. A week later, I went looking for spare towels before the next meet. I found him in the equipment closet, arms raised, pulling new lane markers from the high shelf. Sweat dampened the collar of his shirt. His muscles shifted under the fabric with every movement. The door swung shut behind me. It latched. We were alone. The scent of chlorine and rubber filled the air. Faint, familiar, almost sterile, but not enough to erase the electric silence between us. 10 heartbeats passed. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. The space was small, but the silence was bigger. It filled the room like water, rising between us, daring us to breathe. And neither of us stepped back. "I thought we agreed on distance," he said, voice rough, eyes fixed on my mouth like the promise had already broken inside him. I nodded once. "I know," I whispered, fingertips brushing the coiled lane rope, as if strength could be found in something designed to resist. The ventilation fan above us hummed soft and steady, like ocean surf. But underneath it, there was a pull. An undertow of memory dragging me toward him before I even realized I'd moved. Jason backed against the metal shelving, hands gripping the edges until cans rattled. I stopped inches away. Every muscle screamed in contradiction, flee or finish what memory had already begun. My breath trembled as I finally said, "I wish I could say I hated it." I swallowed. "I wish I could lie to you. And to myself." His jaw tensed. I saw his pulse beating hard at the base of his throat. "Tell me to leave," he whispered, voice cracked. "Please." I closed my eyes, the scent of chlorine and guilt thick around us. Sorrow tasted sharp as bleach on my tongue. But no words came. The silence said it all. Louder than any yes. We didn't touch. We didn't have to. The want filled the air between us, thick as fog, pressing in from all sides, until even breathing felt like surrender. Then, the click of the door latch. Footsteps down the hallway. My younger son's voice, soft and oblivious. Mom, can I have some water? Jason slipped past me, his shoulder grazing mine. A brief spark of static where damp fabric met bare skin. And then he was gone. Like a shadow disappearing when the light turns on. I stood frozen among lane markers and forgotten towels. My heart hammering betrayal in broken Morse code. Driving home, I gripped the steering wheel so hard my hands ached. The road warped beneath me through tear-smeared glass. Lane lines curved like lies I couldn't straighten. In the garage, I sat in the silence after cutting the engine. The laundry room door waited, just a few feet away. Behind it, damp towels still smelling faintly of him. Rain began again, soft and rhythmic against the roof. A metronome counting seconds between sanity and surrender. I closed my eyes and whispered into the dark. I don't know if I want to stop. Or if I just want to stop hating myself for not. That night, Mark insisted on family dinner. In the end, not all betrayals come with slammed doors or raised voices. Some arrive on quiet nights, wrapped in warmth we shouldn't have reached for. This story isn't about villains or victims. It's about the soft erosion of boundaries, the ache of unmet needs, and the impossible tangle of desire and guilt. Sometimes, the deepest wounds are the ones we choose not to hide, but also not to explain. Because in a world of responsibility, a single night can feel like both freedom and a sentence. And some choices, we live with long after the storm has passed. Thank you for giving your time to experience this story. To everyone who resonates with these emotions, whether through fiction or life, you're not alone. A huge appreciation to our growing community of readers who value layered, human stories told without judgment. Your support allows these raw, vulnerable truths to find the space they deserve. Let's keep exploring what it means to be imperfectly, painfully human, together. Disclaimer. This story is a fictional dramatization intended for mature audiences. It explores complex emotional and moral themes, including infidelity, internal conflict, and emotional disconnection. The characters and events are entirely fictional and do not represent any real individuals or situations. This narrative is not meant to promote or excuse betrayal but to spark reflection, empathy, and deeper conversations around relationships, choices, and consequence.